slept well after a nice dinner. We appreciate Bill for taking us out. That was a wonderful time. It was a good time around the table. We'll have a good time this morning. We'll be led out by Dr. Steve Vernon from Mary Hardin Baylor, leading us on a conversation on immigration in the church, followed by Jane Wilson and Dr. Lisa Seeley at East Texas Baptist doing pedagogy, leadership for undergraduate students. So both really great conversations. I will give you, if you'll see me, I'll give you a 5-minute warning, and then we'll go from there. Then we'll have some questions, and then we'll have a group discussion, and looking forward to that piece as well. So without further ado, Vernon.
Thank you, Jack. If you're wondering about the order, I was supposed to be yesterday when Mike gave his presentation with all the other immigration papers yesterday, and then he was supposed to be today, but he had some kids or grandkids stuff going on.
Yeah. Graduating high school.
Yeah, and I've got a granddaughter graduating tomorrow night, so I could stay over. But I wanted to talk to you today about immigration in the church. Because I think the work of the church is often lost in the light of politics these days. Immigration is not new to the United States. People have been immigrating here since the Pilgrims, maybe even the Vikings, not the Minnesota kind, but the other kind. If you follow the Mormons, they believe that they immigrated here. They were the 10 lost tribes of Israel, and they came across from Alaska and came on down and settled in Palmyra, New York, where they buried the golden tablets. People have all sorts of theories about immigration. Pre-Civil War immigration, it was basically y'all come. I mean, we had, the United States had land on top of land on top of land on top of land. Canada was the same. And we needed people to fill the space. And so it was wide open. By the end of the Civil War, the Supreme Court declared that regulation of immigration had to be taken care of by the federal government. There was legislation in 1891, legislation in 1895. The Bureau of Immigration was created, so that began the process. And you get to the 20th century and you have settlement where we're primarily getting immigrants from Northern Europe. The 1900 through 1920, there were 24 million immigrants came in what was called the Great Wave. Outbreak of World War I slowed that down somewhat, but after World War I, it resumed, and the immigration picked back up. In the meantime, the government became more involved, which always helps things when we're from the government and we're here to help you. It's one of the second biggest lies told in the world. But they began getting involved with things, and so that it became much more complicated. You could come to the U.S. depending on the quotas that were allowed from your nation. There were your origin country, other factors. In 1924, the Border Patrol was created to try to protect the borders of the U.S., and that was within the Bureau of Immigration. Well, since that time, immigration has had its ups and downs. 1965 was the low point. There were 320,000 immigrants that came till over the 21st century, which particularly in the last 5 to 10 years, this nation has been really inundated with immigrants because of the kind of world situation we find ourselves in. We've averaged at least 1 million a year since 2000. So, and the federal programs have not helped that out. One of the polarizing events too happened that really had people begin to take sides. And a little thing that happened on September the 11th of 2001, and that was with the bombing of the towers and all of that. And it began to polarize and the feelings about people who were not people of the United States, which is funny because we're all immigrants. I don't know where you came from, We came from Chester, England. Before that, we were Normans. We beat the Saxons in 1066. You know, we won that one. So it happened. I mean, it's been a struggle since that time, especially. In those 20 years, or 25 years since that time, there have been attempts at reforming immigration. The party who is in power typically wants to reform immigration, and the party that is not in power doesn't want to reform immigration because it's just too inviting a stick to beat each other with. And that basically is what happens. I wish I could say that there was a real interest in solving the immigration problem, because I think that could be done. I think we have the brightest people that could do that could manage that. I've heard some of them speak. One of my favorite speakers that probably gets it more than anybody else is James Langford, who is a senator from the state of Oklahoma. He was also a part of the coalition between Republicans and Democrats that tried to put together a cohesive and understandable immigration policy, and that was roundly rejected by both parties. And I've come to the realization that there really is no desire to solve immigration because it's just too good a political hot potato to throw back and forth at one another. And in the process, it becomes a game, and the pawns are the enemies. And that's one of the things that I think is really, really significantly troubled for our world. I come from Texas. Immigration in Texas has been an interesting struggle, depending on who has been in power. There have been issues between the federal government and the state of Texas. Greg Abbott, who is the governor of Texas, passed Operation Lone Star and had all sorts of things happening. 500,000 people immigrated the year before that was passed. After it was passed, there were 39,000 felonies that were prosecuted. There were 505 million doses of fentanyl that the first year of that bill that was captured. To put that in perspective, one of the sources that I used said that that's enough fentanyl to kill the entire population, man, woman, and child, in the United States and Mexico. So that's what the kind of things we're dealing with. Immigration has been a problem for Texas, for the U.S., not just in the last 10 or 15 years. But it's always been a difficult thing to know when you get people who are here and they are the haves, and then, I mean, I've seen the movies and read the stories and books about the Irish when they came and the opposition they faced. When the Oriental folks came and they faced that kind of opposition, it was really significant. Well, why is it such a big deal? In Texas, I would say that it's a big deal because of the corollary issues that go along with it. One of the things that we're seeing more and more now is human trafficking. And it is much more profitable, the cartels have found out, than drug trafficking. That the sale of people, and it's sex slavery, labor slavery, and then gang violence is being imported into the U.S., drug trafficking goes on. You have all of these factors coming in. One of the major highways for all the trafficking that is done, human slavery, is Interstate 35 that runs through the heart of Texas. Runs from San Antonio all the way north through Oklahoma and on farther north. And it is a severe problem. There's more people in slavery now than there were during the Civil War. It's just an incredible thing to see. So how do we function as the church in that world. I have a friend who is one of the sharpest guys I know. Lois and I both worked with him, and some of you Detroit guys, if you don't know him well, you need to. Josue Valerio. Josue is perhaps one of the most brilliant men I know. Probably one of the best managers of people I know. Really gets it and has his feet solidly on the ground. But he talked to me one day about the theology of hospitality, which was new to me. It wasn't one of the 10 points that I learned in systematic theology, but it's very, very important that we realize that we as Christians have the responsibility to welcome the stranger. That is our mission, our goal. And we need to understand that. The Bible talks robustly in the Old Testament and in the New Testament about welcoming the stranger, the resident alien, the foreigner. I don't have a time to do a long study of the theology of hospitality, but I would say this is sort of a thumbnail. In Mosaic law, it prohibits the oppressing of the stranger and grants them equal legal standing. I can give you all the scripture references if you want those, but you can chase those down as easily as I can. In Jeremiah, he talks about, he warns against violence against strangers and widows and the fatherless. Malachi talks about oppressing the stranger as among the sins that God will judge. Leviticus talks about inclusion and the giving of gleaning rights, which we love the story of Boaz and Ruth and Naomi and all of those folks, and that whole story, that love story that we don't talk much about the love part of it. We talk about Boaz more than anybody. Narrative examples. Abraham hosted three strangers in his home. In Ruth's acceptance into Israel. In the New Testament, of course, the passage in Matthew 24 about I was a stranger, you took me in. The story's told of Henry Ford, who went to Ireland and on a tour, and he went to an Irish orphanage, and they asked him for a contribution, and he gave them $2,400. And so the headline came out the next day that he had made a donation of $24,000 to this Irish nursery. And Ford, which was what's the deal? I didn't give you that much money. They said, oh, well, we'll do a retraction tomorrow. He said, I tell you what, keep the money, but when you put the plaque up, just put up on the plaque, I am Henry Ford, I was a stranger and you took me in. Which I thought was pretty clever. But in that time, we are responsible as Christians to be those who take in strangers. I was reading also the parable of the Good Samaritan, and Dr. Ray Summers in his book on the commentary on Luke talks about this passage, does a wonderful job with it. And he goes beyond the story of the Samaritan and the three passerbys and the innkeeper and all of that, and he comes back to the lawyer in the story and talks about the fact that Jesus said to the lawyer, you go and do likewise. Because the investment in the lives of strangers, the investment in the lives of those who are hopeless and helpless is not an option. It is an imperative. Now, you Greek scholars know more about all of the Greek verbs than I do. I did take Greek. I actually passed. I had Greek with Richard Cutter at Baylor University.
Richard Cutter.
And he and I both survived it, although my Greek translation sounded a whole lot like the New American Standard Version of Scripture. That's me. So, with that framework, what's going on? The center of immigration in Texas primarily revolves around the valley. Arlington, McAllen, even Laredo, some in El Paso. I work down there for Valley Baptist Missions Education Center on their board. It's a fascinating board. I go down there 4 times a year. When I was the associate executive director of the Baptist Children's Mission in Texas, I got a call one day, and the secretary rang me and said, "There's a man on the phone, and he sounds mad." Well, if you're sitting in the number 2 chair at the convention, you don't get many calls where somebody's not mad. It just goes with the territory. But there was an irate man on the other end of the line who had evidently been watching one of the more conservative news programs, and he said, what are we Baptists doing down there helping them minor kids get in here, them illegals?" And he said, "I just want you to know that shouldn't happen. We shouldn't let them in our country." And what do I do with this one? So I said, "Let me tell you a story." I said, "Do you have grandkids?" He said, "Yeah, I got grandkids." I said, "Imagine if your grandkids were living in Central America and that you have a grandson that's 9 years old and you recognize that the gangs are already recruiting him and that the only hope he has in life is to join the gang or get out of the country. Otherwise, he'll be killed. There's no question. He will die, and the gangs will kill him. So, the only hope you see is to put that child by himself on a train that leaves the southern border of Mexico, and you ride the entire length of the nation of Mexico to the Texas border. And the first thing that grandson does when he gets there, if he gets there, is to get off that train and find a Border Patrol agent and turn himself in. Now, what the Border Patrol agent will do is they will take that young man to the Harlingen Center, the Valley Baptist Missions Education Center, where he will be taken in, he will be bathed, clothed, housed, educated, and evangelized. We have that privilege to do that at Valley Baptist Missions Education Center. The program is run by what used to be Baptist Child and Family Services in San Antonio, and has now become Compass, because they do more government programs now than they do anything that, I think what they found out is that there's more money in the federal government than there is in Baptist pockets. At least that is available, let's put it that way. But there they will be taken care of, and they will usually stay about 3 months, and they will find a place for those kids somewhere in the U.S., or in some cases they're deported. I said, "Now, that's your choice. Do you want to put him on a train and move him where Baptists can take care of him, or do you want him to be killed by the gangs?" He said, "Well, that's not a choice." He said, I will put him on the train." And I said, "Then we'll take care of the kids and you take care of the politics." Then we got to talking, and he was from Lockney, Texas, out in West Texas, and I was afraid to talk to him much more because I was afraid I might end up being kin to him, and that would have been a bit of a mistake. Over the period since 2009, when that program began, there have been more than 100,000 boys come through that center. They've had more than 20,000 professions of faith. Many of those kids have gone into ministry. One was being deported, and I talked to the director down there, and he said, "Yeah, but he told me," he said, "I'm not afraid because God has prepared me," and this young man happens to be going into ministry. "God's prepared me to go back to my homeland. If it cost me my life, it cost me my life, but I will go and be a witness for the Lord." And I'm thinking, wow, that is the kind of investment that churches can make. You notice I left girls out. 8 out of 10 boys make it. 2 out of 10 girls may make it to get on those trains. The other 8 are probably being sold into the sex trade or killed. All of the girls are sexually abused. Most of the girls, when they get here, are pregnant. That's just the kind of world that they live in. There is in learning about the valley, it's fascinating because there is the last checkpoint, which is 60 miles north of the Rio Grande. And that's the last checkpoint. In that 60-mile period, there's a place called the Rape Tree, where there are chains around the base of the tree, where young girls have been tied so that they can be raped serially. And then what the cartels do, because they're the ones that are doing all of this, is they take the underwear and put it in the tree. And there's pictures of the tree. You can probably see it on the internet, but it's disgusting. Who's going to be the people that take care of the immigrants who come through? And I think that's who we are as the church. We have to be involved. Have we been? I know what Valley Baptist has done. I know what the churches in the valleys have done. The Rio Grande Valley Baptist Association, about 40% of their churches are actively involved in taking care of that. They also work with the charitable organizations, the Catholic Charities, Rio Grande Valley, La Posada Providencia, the Good Neighbor Settlement Houses, all of those kinds of things, working hard. But you've got to realize that these churches were overwhelmed when millions of people crossed the border. And how do these churches put that together? And these are not little blue-collar, one-room churches. These are some significant churches where people are professional people, and they're trying to meet the needs of their community. The association has been involved. Valley Baptist has been involved, and the numbers that come through there, they estimate about 560 boys come through a month, and it's an amazing work that they do. I asked Eli Laura, who I was talking about, what impact did it have on the churches down there? And he said they were just overwhelmed, but they just kept trying to meet the needs that they could and help those that they could. I asked him, did that make a significant impact on the border? And he said yes, because the churches of the valley became the front line of humanitarianism in the valley. That's not the federal government. That's churches. I also went down, I had the opportunity to go with James Dobson's group, Fort Texas Baptist, that went down to do a fact-finding tour. You know, everybody who was anybody did a fact-finding tour of the valley, except some of our politicians, and they were pretty selective about what they did. So, but it was fascinating to see what was going on. We saw the line of people coming across the Rio Grande River. It's not deep. It's about 18 inches deep in some places, so it's not like you got to swim. But saw people that came across, and the buses would be waiting for them, and they would surrender themselves. They would be put on the buses. They would be processed, and then we went to see where they were holding those people, which was it was like a big warehouse kind of thing with various rooms that were only divided by a chain link fence. We talked to one border patrol agent who, in tears, told us about the fact that the federal government doesn't give them enough stuff to take care of, particularly newborns. So from his own pocket, he was buying the formula for diapers. He said, these people need help, and I'm going to help them. And if the government reimburses me, that's not going to happen. But he said, Jesus has called me to care for these people. And you see that kind of heart with what people do. But what can a church do? What can we do? I think the first thing is that we need to calm the rhetoric down. I mean, on both sides. I've always been an equal opportunity offender when it comes to politics and speaking, that neither of the quote sides, we've become more polarized and than at any time, at least in my world, and we have demonized the opposition. Social media has had a lot to do with that, and it's disgusting. And we need to recognize that we have brothers and sisters in Christ on every side of whichever aisle the aisle is on. I think we also need to recognize that our citizenship is not here. We are not citizens, first of all, in the United States. We are citizens of the kingdom of God.
Amen.
That's where our alliance has to be, for we are ambassadors for God.
Sorry.
Hello.
Hello. Sorry.
We need to learn and teach our churches the theology of hospitality. They know how to be nice to the people who visit who might join, but what about the people who are not like them? That needs to happen. We need to support ministries in our churches that meet the needs of some of these folks, whether they're food ministries or furniture ministries, or finding them housing, or helping them get their kids enrolled in schools, and all of that. They come here with nothing and not knowing anything, often not even know the language, and they need the help that those of us who are veteran citizens can take care of, can help them find the needs that they have. You need to invite them to your churches. Say, well, I'm not sure my church would be glad to have them. Well, shame on your church then. And we need to support organizations that are on the front lines of these things. We need to write our legislators and tell them to get off their duffs and do something. It's going to take compromise. It's going to take talking. And if all we're going to try to do is get reelected and scream at each other, then we deserve what we get. But we need to be the presence of Christ to the immigrants of our world. Oh, and to the rednecks of our world too, and everybody else in between. But we have to be the presence of Christ, because if we don't, as churches, as Christians, nobody's going to. Thanks.
We do have about 4 minutes here if we want to ask any questions, or we can save that till later.
Steve, I've got a question. Because our church is, I guess for 10 or 12 years, has been going down to Del Rio and doing work with immigrants and various things on the border, depending on what it's like. I mean, we've been down there before when there have been bus loads that the Border Patrol has been bringing over to a processing center, coalition center there. And then, like last year, no immigrants at all. And we see this extreme, with our government. It's like, let's let everybody in, and then let's let nobody in. And it's just crazy. But we just, as a church, we pretty much follow, this is what the Bible tells us to do. We're going to love those that we see and we're working with. But there are always several in the congregation, I would say even like in a senior seminar that I taught on the topic of immigration. We had 34 students, but we had 2 who were Christian nationalists, and the concern there, and I mean it's a legitimate concern, if we just let everybody in and not really checking that closely, then it's more than welcoming the stranger. There are those that can really be, causing damage. How would you suggest we, as leaders of groups going down, field some of those questions by church members or even these students in classes?
Well, one of the biblical passages that you read in Leviticus says that that the stranger is governed by the same rules as the people who are there. So that's, I know the big thing always comes up, all the criminals that are, and there are some of that, and there's been some dumping grounds where nations have just dumped their prisons into the U.S. system. So, but as far as how do you justify that to your Christian nationalists?
They can't be convinced by just about anything, but.
And I think I would tell you to stay home. Don't come. I mean, if this is not what God's called you to, and if and then there are other things you could say to them, but probably shouldn't. But this is not this is not your ministry. If you can't have compassion on these people, then, read James and then, support those who want to go, who this is their ministry. But it is, the open border thing was tough, and so is the population, the kids coming across, went from like 600 we rotated 600 boys through every 3 months. We now rotate about 40.
Yeah.
But what I've understood in studying the history of immigration in the U.S. is we're going to have it again. This depends on who wins the next election, and it's going to be serially that way from now on. That if depends on who wins the election, that's going to be the hot potato that we're going to throw back and forth, and they're either going to open the borders or close the borders, and then all of a sudden it starts over again. The people who run those programs are not worried with the closing of the border now, because it'll come back. It always has.
Do we need a better education in our churches and society about the difference between the role of the church and the government? Because I think we're both trying to do it all. I think it was Dietrich Bonhoeffer who talked about, the church, yes, has to care for the guy that got beat up on the side of the road, but who gets rid of the bad guys so that people don't keep getting beat up on the side of the road? We do need people to take care of the bad guys.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes this is where it gets mixed up, is the church and the government are both trying to do both. And
yeah, or they depend on the other one, and neither one of them does.
Yeah, or that too.
And that I think happens, and I think those need to be delineated. Jesus was pretty clear, render to Caesar and render to God.
Yeah.
But it's and that's always what's cultural, what's theological, those are always going to be hard lines to draw in every issue.
Can we thank Steve?